Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, with all the hype that surrounded the recent release of the Ryzen APUs, the 2200G and 2400G, it's no surprise that many people, including myself, have recommended them for cheap gaming setups. However, as of recent, Intel have released a new lineup of Pentiums, as well as some cheaper chipset motherboards. So today I wanted to take a look at the cheapest in the new Pentium lineup, the Gold G5400. Now, this is a dual-core CPU with 4 threads in a traditional Pentium fashion. But first of all, I'd like to give a massive thank you to James over at CCL, who actually provided the processor and motherboard for today's video. They've sent me some graphics cards in the past, so a massive thank you to them. Go and check them out if you want a great selection of CPUs, graphics cards and all your other computer components, as well as desktop PCs at great prices. They've got great delivery service as well. They didn't tell me to say that, I just wanted to shout them out. And they've also got a great clearance section. But now, let's move on, take a look at the Pentium and see what it's capable of. At £55 or $64 RRP, the Pentium Gold G5400 sounds like a tempting deal. 8th gen CPUs like this would have originally required an expensive Z370 board to work, but with the release of cheaper H310, B360 and H370 chipsets, it's now possible to build a more budget-orientated system based on a brand new Coffee Lake CPU. The motherboard I'm using is an Asus Prime H310M-A, nothing special, but it has all the features you need for a basic gaming build. This hyper-threaded dual-core G5400 is the cheapest in the lineup of the new Pentiums, and it may seem like a big no-go due to its 2 physical cores, but is it worth buying? Well, let's find out. To give you an idea of comparison, I'll also be including results from my Ryzen 3 2200G, a processor that cost £25 more here in the UK, yet one that would be very similar in price when part of a complete budget build as the G5400. I'm also using 8 gigs of 2400MHz DDR4 memory today, the maximum speed supported by the G5400, as well as a 1070, which will not only allow the CPU to reach its full potential, but it's the absolute highest GPU I'd recommend pairing with a CPU like this. To start off with, I ran some CPU intensive benchmarks like Cinebench R15. With a multi-core score of 401 and a single core score of 157, the G5400 outperforms the 2200G in terms of single core performance, yet falls behind it in the multi-core test by quite some margin, though remember the Ryzen has 4 physical cores. It's a similar story in Geekbench 4, whereby the Pentium pulls ahead in the single-core test, yet is overtaken in the multi-core test. These results should be reflective in a Premiere Pro render test, which will use as many cores as you can give it, rendering a 30-second 60fps 1080p clip, completed in 45 seconds on the Pentium, which isn't too bad as the editing software itself feels fast enough to use, though the 2200G completed the same task in just 33 seconds. Already I can say that whilst the G5400 is alright when it comes to editing and productivity, spending the extra on the 2200G would be beneficial to you if creating content is more your thing. But let's bring the focus back to the Pentium as we move on to some gaming tests. With Assassin's Creed Origins, I ran the in-game benchmark, which as expected maxed out the CPU and meant we saw an average of 46 frames per second. The gameplay was plagued by stutter though, returning 1% and 0.1% lows of 14 and 4 respectively. While the game is playable, the constant micro freezes will likely be quite annoying. Comparing that to the Ryzen 3 2200G, and while the average was a tiny bit better, again the stutter was present and gave us similar results. In Far Cry 5 the results were very good, and the CPU didn't tend to run at a constant 100% usage unless we were on or looking out over water. With an average of 77 FPS on Ultra, with 1% and 0.1% lows of 57 and 45 respectively, the G5400 did a great job of keeping up here, and the experience was a far cry, from the AC Origins performance. The Pentium also outperformed the 2200G by a little bit, though it was a negligible difference like before. Rise of the Tomb Raider also ran well at the highest settings, with a smooth average of 58 frames per second. The 0.1% low meant there was some stutter, namely during the last benchmark level, and during dense forest gameplay, but the overall experience was a decent one. Once again, for comparison, the Pentium beat the Ryzen 3 by 4 FPS on average, once again leading to negligible real-world gameplay differences when paired with a GTX 1070. In CSGO, the Pentium also did very well at the maximum settings. CSGO is a more CPU intensive game, so the difference here between the G5400 and Ryzen was a little more significant, but again, not too major. With the 0.1% low result swinging back in the Pentium's favour, I'm also happy to report that the Pentium stayed pretty cool during testing, idling at 30 degrees and maxing out at 52, compared to the slightly warmer Ryzen. Just like with performance, thermal differences here are quite minor as well. The G5400 also has integrated UHD 610 graphics, which are capable of running games like CSGO at 1080p while maintaining close to 60 frames per second. Of course, this is where a CPU like the Ryzen 3 2200G obliterates its Team Blue counterpart, but either of these two are great choices if you plan to use a discrete graphics card. So let's draw up a conclusion. The Pentium G5400 is a great CPU with excellent gaming capabilities when paired with a discrete GPU, if you have a tighter budget. It also has acceptable onboard graphics, so would be ideal for a home theatre PC, but can't be overclocked on the cheaper chipset motherboards. Having said that, you pair one of these bad boys with a 1050 or 1050 Ti, and you've got yourself a decent 1080p gaming machine that will run most games out there just fine. I plan to build a cheaper system around these components very soon for a more realistic and affordable look at performance in more games, so stay tuned for that. A quick word on the 2200G comparisons though. Despite the extra £25 here in the UK, or whatever the difference in price is where you live, between the two CPUs, the extra will be worth it if editing and content creation is more your thing, or you will be relying on onboard graphics. If gaming is literally all you care about and you couldn't care less about the integrated GPUs of either, and you want to save money wherever possible, then the G5400 will be a great choice, and you still have that option to upgrade to an i5 or i7 later on. It's nice to see Intel's Pentium lineup still alive and kicking, but I can't help but think there won't be many more generations of dual-core 4-threaded CPUs. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this Pentium G5400 review. If you did, please leave a like on it down below. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Let me know if you're thinking about buying one of these or whether you have one in your system yourself. And as always, I hope to see you all in the next video.